You're tuned in to the Reality Fred podcast. Food and travel, cool stuff, weird stuff, entertainment, and more. You made the choice to be here, and my friend, you've chosen wisely. Now buckle up, because it's time to get started. It's time for the Reality Fred podcast.
When you're by yourself or when the world slows down, Reality Fred. When life decides to give you the run around, Reality Fred. Or when your glass is full and your cigar is just right. Fire up the podcast that keeps you up all night. Reality Fred, I'll say it again. Reality Fred, always there like a friend. You know it's time, so just press play. Reality Fred, come and take me away. When the workday ends and when it's time to kick back. Reality Fred, when the sun hangs low and it is time to relax. Reality Fred. Or when your glass is full and your cigar is just right. Fire up the podcast that keeps you up all night. Reality Fred, I'll say it again. Reality Fred, always there like a friend. You know it's time, so just press play. Reality Fred, come and take me away.
And welcome back, Reality Fred podcast followers. You're tuning in for another rendition of our Theme Within a Theme. This is the Halloween theme 2017, and this is part 3 of the series that we're doing basically about Chad Calek's films. If you're just tuning in now and didn't listen to the past 2 podcasts, I highly recommend that you just stop and you go back and start with the podcast we did about American Ghost Hunter. And then we followed that up with Chad Calek's second documentary, A Blood Red Sky. And so this one, it all leads up to this one.
Sir No Face.
Sir No Face, because it was epic.
It's really this one that started off the whole thing.
Yeah. Now, what we need to do, in the first podcast, we did intro how this whole thing came along. I do think that we put... Let's quickly summarize. We'll start with you. You brought it to my attention, so I'll let you get us from you contacting me to us doing it at the theater, and then I'll talk about what our plan was afterwards real quick to get us back on track.
So I live in the beautiful town of Oakmont, Pennsylvania, and in Oakmont, Pennsylvania, there's this awesome theater. It's an old movie theater from early 1900s, late 1800s, that they've turned into an entertainment venue, and they get all sorts of really cool acts. One of the things that they got was actually Chad Calek's Sir No Face, which is actually only showing at this point in 17 cities around the United States, and Oakmont, Pennsylvania was one. Having, of course, recognized the name Chad Calek and watching the trailer...
Did you really recognize it?
I recognized
you
the name.
did?
I didn't know exactly where it was from until I read his bio, and then I knew where it was from.
You actually recognized it.
I recognized the name. I'm real good with recognizing names. We talked about this earlier. So anyway, I had recognized the name, I read the bio, and then knowing that Fred and I were bonded by death by working at the cemetery digging graves together in college, I immediately contacted him and said, hey man, this is something we should go check out. And we went down to the beautiful Oaks Theater in Oakmont, Pennsylvania, and checked out the Sir No Face. And I guess at this point I'll let Fred kind of go through with that.
Real quick, pop quiz. What's the best job you ever had?
I would have to say there was this one time I worked at a cemetery in college.
Best job we ever had.
Seriously, we worked. So it was actually. Can I give him a rundown of our daily activities?
No, let's not do that. But it was just the best job we ever had.
It was a pretty good job.
And even the theme back then was, if we could actually make a living doing this for the rest of our lives, this is what we would do.
Well, we worked for about 1 hour a day.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah.
But anyways, okay, getting back on track. So, we watched the film that night, Sir No Face. It was awesome. I don't mean the overall. Well, yeah, the overall film was awesome. But what you see in it, which is what we'll get to, it is awesome. And so we left the theater and we're like, man, we should Well, first we were just going back and forth. What do you think happened? Did you believe it? Do you think it was real? Do you think it was fake? What do you think it was? And so we're going back and forth, and we're like, hey, you know what? We should just, like, save our thoughts, our definitive thoughts. We should save our definitive thoughts and do a podcast. And then it kind of turned in the idea from there, well, let's go ahead and watch Chad's other films, American Ghost Hunter and Blood Red Sky, so we can lead up to it and kind of discuss all three. So that brings us to where we are today. We just finished recording the episodes about the other two documentaries, and now we're finally, when did we see that? I mean, it was sometime it was the day of the eclipse.
That's right. It was August 21st, so we're almost,
3 weeks or so, I guess.
Yeah,
can't do math like that. But it was on the day of the eclipse, which was also kind of neat. We did see
I seriously
Sir No-Face the day of the
seriously
eclipse.
thought the last person I was going to see was Fred. Thank God it wasn't.
Thank God it wasn't Sir No-Face.
Yeah.
Because it was freaky. So we decided to do the podcast. So there's a lot to talk about.
There's so much to talk about.
And we have to make sure we're going to have to do a good job because I really want to avoid wrapping this up and be like, oh, we didn't mention this, we should have talked about this.
And it would be like a Chad Calek film.
Oh, Sting.
Sorry, it was just way too easy.
All right. I keep thinking, boy, if Chad ever listens to these,
actually, honestly, I'm starting to think about it. Chad might.
I have a
actually
lot of
appreciate
respect.
these.
The thing is, I keep nitpicking him from a person that just that has a background in video.
Look, and
That's
I'm nitpicking him. I don't even know if I'm nitpicking him. If you listen to the first two, I guess you can call in and tell us. But I'm just coming at it from the standpoint of Sir No-Face, and I haven't even gotten to my opinions on Sir No-Face. Mm-hmm. But every single one of his films I've gone into with an expectation.
Okay.
And it's really the only films that I go into with an expectation.
I see. Yeah.
So Chad's starting off at an unfair advantage. So I'm not going to downplay.
But for some reason, he's giving you that level of respect that you're going into it with an expectation. For some reason.
Either that,
you know
or he
what I mean?
just brands himself, as I said, and markets himself so well. But this is another one I just went into with more expectation on this film than any film I've ever seen.
I had no expectation. So actually going into these, I had no expectation. And admittedly, this was my first Chad Calek. I hadn't watched. I knew of American Ghost Hunter.
We had both seen Paranormal State.
Yes. We'd seen Paranormal State, but I had never watched any of his films before. Now, part of it was, when I look at the trailer for Blood Red Sky, it never interests me. I just would watch the trailer and think this just looks boring. I really don't want to watch a documentary about just a weird experiment. You know, it just didn't interest me. And American Ghost Hunter was so soon after Paranormal State that I just put a perception on it. I colored American Ghost Hunter with, well, Paranormal State has come to an end. He needs to do something. This is what he did. He made a documentary about a ghost story, and it just happens to be his family. And it just never was like, this is something I need to go see. So I had never seen any of his films before. I had no expectation. Really, I mean, I went because you were excited about it. You wanted me to come out to Oakmont and see it. I knew who Chad Calek was. It said that Chad would be there. I thought, oh, I'll meet him in real life. And then I watched the trailer, and it just seemed more entertaining than the idea of the other two. Blood Red Sky, you watch the trailer, it just didn't seem entertaining. But this seemed entertaining. Like, people were freaking out. It showed people, even in the trailer, it shows audience reaction when they see the footage and they freak out and stuff. Hey, if anything, this will be fun.
And every single person I showed, whether I know that they're interested in ghost stories or not, was interested in this film.
Yeah.
This film had a lot of draw to it, and if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to spoiler alert or anything, but if you haven't seen it, you need to see it.
Oh, we're going to spoil it.
Okay, well,
we're going to spoil it.
No, what I meant is I'm not going to spoil my opinion on
yet,
the matter.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm not going to spoil it now. If you haven't seen this film, you need to, because Chad, whether I agree with Chad or not, is irrelevant, which you'll find out later, but Chad's a brilliant filmmaker, and the film is entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
And it does a great job of doing what it's supposed to do. So you've got to see all three of Chad's films, two of which are free on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, I'm glad you remembered to mention that. So now, let me ask your opinion. Do you want to do this the same way that we did the other one? Should we discuss the summary, talk about what we liked and didn't like, and then get off the fence, or do you want to change the approach?
You know, it really doesn't matter to me. There's just so much to say on this one, because this is the one I think we've had the longest to stew over.
Yeah.
And for me, this is the one that had the highest expectation. And let's face it, it's the one that cost us the most money.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into at least what it's about. I think it's a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Sir No-Face is a film that was never intended to be made. Let's start with that. Basically,
right, I think it's important to note that this was not like Chad. Chad did not come up with the idea of I'm going to create a film about this place in Cockatoo Island, Australia. Mm-hmm. This was not a planned film.
This is something that was more or less brought to him.
And the other thing is neat
to an extent.
And I guess I can say this now too. This footage, unlike the other two, is not Chad's footage.
No. So really, what this is? Okay, the story is Chad had just come out with A Blood Red Sky. So I guess go back to 2015. He had just released A Blood Red Sky, and he's touring with it, which is what he does. He makes a film, and he goes on tour with it to make money. He rents out venues, sells tickets, meet and greets, merchandise, stuff like that. So he's on tour with Blood Red Sky, and I don't know why, but decides to take it to Australia. So they actually go to Australia to do kind of like a mini 6-city tour in Australia showing the movie. And, well, of course, I'm not sure we'll take the thing global. Why not? Anyway, so they go to Australia, and while he's over there showing A Blood Red Sky, that's his reason for being there. He's not there to make a documentary or a film. He's there to show Blood Red Sky. That's what he's doing. While he's there, he just happens to meet the West Sydney Paranormal Research Team. And I think I'm getting that slightly wrong, but...
No, I think that's correct. The thing about...
They just come out to meet him. They hear he's there. They come out to meet him, but just to meet him. They don't say anything.
So he did Blood Red Sky the exact same way he did Sir No Face. And that is that there were 3 different ticket packages you can buy. There's one where it's like you can sit down and have dinner with Chad one-on-one. Mm-hmm. And so that's what the West Sydney Paranormal Society did, if I'm saying that correctly.
I don't know if they did. Are you sure about that? I don't want to say that's what they did.
I know that there was an opportunity for them to walk up to him, shake his hand, and ask him questions.
Well, here's what happened. I don't think it was that. I think they just came to watch the film. And he remembers seeing them and this and that. Because he said they stood out because they were all wearing matching T-shirts and you couldn't really miss them.
Oh, yeah, I did miss that.
He was saying it was like later that night. So anyways, they show the movie. He remembers meeting them afterwards when people were just talking to him stuff. And he said it was later that night. He was in his hotel room. And they came as a group to his hotel room to just meet with him one more time.
You're right. I forgot all about the hotel room.
I mean, not that the hotel room's a part of the story or the plot or anything, but it's just, it doesn't even matter what we're talking about. But at the end of the day, there's a paranormal research team, the West Sydney Paranormal Research Team. They come basically to see A Blood Red Sky. They introduce themselves. And that's really all it is.
It's worth noting, because I'm going to forget, that the West Sydney Paranormal Society, or whatever they're called, mm-hmm. Unfortunately they're disbanded, but they don't make a profit.
They're disbanded? I didn't know this.
He said it.
Since when?
I don't know since when. I don't have an exact date.
All right, we'll table that. Okay.
All right. I will Google that. But the point is that even if they are still a thing, they were going and doing investigations for free.
Yeah.
So it is important to note that these guys weren't going, hey, Chad, help us make a buck.
Right. But even that day, they literally are just meeting Chad. Now, basically, Chad kind of takes a liking to them. And I think what happens is, in a nutshell, Chad basically just enjoyed his experience in Australia. So he gets back to the United States, and he basically just kind of connects on Facebook, more or less, with the leader of the group. We need to know his name. Can you look that up?
I'll look it up.
All right, so Matt's going to look that up, because it is kind of important, because we're going to have to refer to him so much. The guy that's the leader. So Matt will get the name. And he basically, Chad basically connects with him on Facebook. I guess they just communicate, and then there's a point where Chad's like, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to come back to Australia and kind of do another tour. I'm going to come back to Australia, to Sydney, kind of promote the movie Blood Red Sky again, but this time, when I come back, would you like to kind of work together? So, at one point, we'll kind of just do a thing where we'll each talk to everybody that's there, and we'll show off our best footage. And that's how it kind of all got to say. He says, I'll bring in my best footage of ghost stuff. You bring your best footage, and we'll kind of just have fun with it, letting everybody see, and we'll take turns, okay? So fast forward, Chad's back in Australia, and they're having a little paranormal conference together. Chad's there with his people. This guy's there with his people from the West Sydney team. Chad shows his footage, and of course Chad likes to smoke cigarettes. So Chad shows his footage. The guy from the West Sydney, he starts showing. Are you still not finding this?
I'm still looking at that.
All right, well hurry up, do better.
Believe it or not,
Google
it's actually really hard to find.